My name is Ava Monroe, and I never asked for miracles, but one found me in the heart of Washington, D.C. I was a single mother just trying to survive, until a letter arrived, telling me I'd inherited a crumbling mansion on Embassy Row from a grandmother I never met. Inside those dusty halls, I found blueprints that didn't match the house, hidden rooms beneath the marble floors, and sapphires worth more than $20 million, stolen during the Cold War. They offered me money to stay quiet. They tried to burn me out. But what they didn't know was that faith doesn't bow to fear, and God doesn't forget the truth. If you believe that light always wins over darkness, hit that like, share, and subscribe, because this story proves that miracles still walk among us. Rain drummed steadily against the slate rooftops of Washington, D.C., turning the elegant streets of Embassy Row into rivers of silver light. The air smelled of wet leaves and old stone. Ava Monroe stood beneath a flickering street lamp, clutching a yellow envelope that had already begun to curl at the edges. At 34, Ava carried the kind of beauty that seemed both deliberate and accidental. Her black raincoat cinched tightly around her waist, emphasizing the hourglass curves that had once turned heads at Georgetown cafes before life demanded she trade charm for survival. Her dark auburn hair, tied back in a hurried twist, glimmered under the rain like old wine, and her hazel eyes, too sharp for their own good, watched the city with wary intelligence. She worked double shifts as a receptionist at a downtown dental clinic, spoke little, smiled only when required, and saved every tip. There was a time, before Lily, when Ava dreamed of law school. But dreams, like umbrellas in a storm, break easier than one thinks. Now, with her 9-year-old daughter's small hand wrapped around hers, she unfolded the letter again under the streetlight. Miss Ava Monroe, by the will of Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, deceased, you are the designated inheritor of the property at 1423 Embassy Row, Washington, D.C. Ava's breath caught. She had never heard the name Eleanor Whitmore. Her mother had never spoken of relatives in D.C. The letter mentioned no condition, no explanation, only a set of keys to be collected from a local caretaker named Mr. Carver. Beside her, Lily Monroe tilted her small face up toward the rain. The girl's light brown curls stuck to her cheeks, and her sea-green eyes, so unlike Ava's, were full of wonder instead of exhaustion. Lily had the easy curiosity of children who haven't yet learned how fragile adults can be. "Mom," she said softly, "what if Grandma's house is a castle?" Ava smiled, the expression foreign on her lips. "Then I suppose we're princesses, baby, just without the crown or the carriage." The next morning, the rain had thinned to a cold drizzle. Ava drove her old gray Honda Civic past embassies with marble columns and manicured gardens, until the GPS announced, "You've arrived." The mansion loomed at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac, a Beaux-Arts relic cloaked in ivy, its tall windows dim with neglect. The iron gate creaked as Ava pushed it open. A crow startled from the gable, its wings slicing through the mist. "This is it?" Lily whispered, eyes wide. Ava nodded. "Ours, apparently." The front door bore an intricate carving of an eagle mid-flight, wings half broken, its beak open as if warning them away. The brass knocker was shaped like a lion's head, green with age, yet strangely dignified. A man emerged from the porch shadows, tall and gaunt in a brown trench coat. His hair was snow-white and thin, his face drawn with wrinkles that looked carved rather than aged. His name was Mr. Walter Carver, the caretaker. His blue eyes were sharp, observant, the kind of gaze that catalogued people before they spoke. "You must be Miss Monroe," he said, his voice low, sandpapered by years of cigarettes and disappointment. "Mrs. Whitmore's heir. Didn't expect she had any left." "I didn't either," Ava said. Carver produced a brass key attached to a faded ribbon. "She spoke little in her final years," he added. "Lived alone, rarely left the house. But she made me promise, if a woman named Ava ever showed up, to give her this." "Did she say why?" Carver's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "She said blood remembers even when names forget." He handed her the key, his calloused fingers brushing hers briefly. There was something unsettling in the gesture, like passing a secret rather than a key. Ava turned the lock. The door groaned open. Inside, the scent of old cedar and forgotten time flooded her senses. Dust swirled in the filtered light, catching on the edges of antique mirrors. Faded portraits of strangers lined the corridor, their painted eyes following her every step. Lily's sneakers squeaked on the marble floor. "It smells funny." "It smells like history," Ava murmured, though a chill threaded through her. In the parlor, cobwebs hung like lace curtains. The fireplace still held the ghost of old ash. On the wall above it hung a portrait of a young woman in a cream dress with auburn hair and hazel eyes, the same as Ava's. She felt her pulse quicken. "Mom, she looks like you," Lily whispered. Before Ava could answer, a shadow darted across the window. Her heart lurched. She moved closer, but when she looked outside, there was only rain and the iron gate swaying in the wind. Carver cleared his throat. "Miss Monroe, a word of advice. Don't believe every story people offer about this house, and don't sell to the first bidder. Some treasures attract the wrong kind of attention." "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He simply tipped his hat, his boots echoing across the porch as he left them alone with the echoing silence. For a moment, all Ava could hear was the ticking of an old clock somewhere deeper in the house. Lily had wandered to the staircase, tracing her fingers along the banister carved with tiny winged figures. "This place feels alive," Lily said dreamily. "Like it's breathing." Ava tried to laugh, but it came out thin. "It's just settling after years of dust." But as they stepped further inside, a drop of rain rolled down from the cracked skylight and landed on a stack of unopened envelopes on the hall table. Each one addressed to Eleanor Whitmore in a trembling hand and stamped, "Return to sender." The clock stopped ticking. Then the doorbell rang, a sharp, electric sound that made both of them jump. Ava opened it. A tall man in a gray tailored suit stood beneath an umbrella, water beading off its black silk. His dark hair was combed back neatly, his jawline clean but tense, like a man too used to hiding impatience. His eyes, pale blue and unreadable, gave away nothing. "Miss Monroe," he said smoothly. "My name's Ethan Ward. I represent an interested party. My client would like to make you an offer, $120,000 in cash today." Rain hissed against the stone steps. Ava stared at him, speechless, the mansion breathing softly behind her. And somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, low, deliberate, like a warning. The storm had passed, but the world it left behind seemed bruised and quiet. The air around Embassy Row carried the faint scent of wet brick and old magnolia trees. Inside the mansion, soft light from the street lamps bled through the tall arched windows, catching the dust that danced lazily in the silence. Ava Monroe stood at the threshold of the grand parlor, arms crossed tightly around herself, staring at the letter that had just been slid under the front door. The envelope was heavy, sealed with dark red wax stamped with a simple letter. M. Her pulse thrummed in her ears as she turned it over. No return address, no explanation. The handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned, almost regal. The words were few but sharp enough to chill her spine. Leave before Sunday. M. Ava exhaled slowly. Fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She'd spent too many nights fighting anxiety with cheap wine and fake optimism. But this was something different. The house had a presence now, as if someone unseen had just exhaled behind her. "Mom?" Lily's small voice broke the tension. The girl appeared in the hallway, wearing one of Ava's oversized sweaters, her curls messy from sleep. "Who was it?" "No one," Ava lied gently, tucking the letter into her coat pocket. "Just some old mail." Lily nodded but didn't look convinced. She was perceptive for her age, the kind of child who noticed when adults hesitated. The German shepherd, Atlas, padded quietly to her side, his wet fur leaving prints on the marble floor. He was a magnificent animal. 4 years old, with a thick black and tan coat and amber eyes that seemed to see too much. His ears stayed alert, flicking toward every creak in the house. Ava knelt beside him, brushing her fingers through the damp fur. "You're a good boy," she whispered. "But where on earth did you come from?" Atlas tilted his head as if understanding, then moved to the window, growling low in his throat. Ava followed his gaze. Across the street, under the dim light of a lamp-post, a figure stood. Motionless. She couldn't make out a face, only the outline of a tall man in a dark overcoat. When she blinked, he was gone. By morning, the rain had given way to pale sunlight that made the mansion's imperfections painfully visible. Cracks in the plaster, warped floorboards, a faded rug that once might have been royal blue. Ava brewed coffee on the old gas stove, its flame sputtering weakly. The smell filled the kitchen, mingling with the scent of damp wood. She decided to explore the house properly. If she was going to live here, she needed to know what secrets it kept. She began with the study. A vast room lined with shelves, some empty, some crowded with books too fragile to touch. On the far wall hung the portrait she'd noticed before. A woman in white from the early 1900s, auburn hair piled high, expression serene yet haunting. Beneath it, a brass nameplate read, "Eleanor Whitmore, 1912. "Great," Ava muttered. "You again." The layout in the lawyer's documents didn't match what she was seeing. According to the floor plan, the wall behind the portrait should have been a thin partition, but it looked thicker. She tapped it with her knuckles. A dull, hollow echo answered back. "Mom, look!" Lily's voice carried from the kitchen. Ava turned, following it through the corridor lined with faded wallpaper. Lily stood near the back door, smiling in delight, as Atlas sniffed at a trail of muddy paw prints leading in from outside. The prints were large. Too large for him. Ava's stomach tightened. "Did you let anyone in?" Lily shook her head. "No. He just came in like he already knew the way." Ava looked down at Atlas. He sat calmly by the doorway now, tail sweeping the tiles. The dog's demeanor was protective, not wild. He was clean except for his legs, as if he'd just been waiting in the rain for the right moment to return home. Then I guess he belongs here, Ava said softly, though her heart told her there was more to it. That afternoon, while Lily played upstairs, Ava returned to the study armed with a flashlight and determination. She moved the portrait aside, revealing faint cracks around the frame. She ran her fingers along the wood, feeling for seams, and found a thin groove running vertically. The wall wasn't solid. It was hollow. She pressed harder. Something shifted behind it, like a breath. "Okay, Eleanor," she whispered to the portrait leaning against the desk. "What are you hiding?" Her search was interrupted by a sudden knock at the back door. She froze, listening. Another knock, this time louder, impatient. When she opened it, an older woman stood there. Her umbrella dripped rainwater onto the threshold, though the sky had been clear all morning. She wore a wool coat the color of ashes and carried herself with an odd mix of elegance and weariness. Her name, as she introduced herself, was Margaret Keene, a neighbor. Margaret was in her late 60s, with silver hair pinned neatly and sharp blue eyes behind rimless glasses. There was something severe about her, softened only by the faint scent of lavender clinging to her coat. "I heard someone had moved into the Whitmore place," she said. "Didn't think anyone would dare." Ava managed a polite smile. "I suppose I like a challenge." Margaret's lips twitched, almost approvingly. "You should be careful. That house doesn't like strangers." "That sounds like a story," Ava replied. "It's a warning," Margaret said simply, her gaze flicking toward the upstairs window where Lily's shadow passed. "Children hear things first, you know. The house remembers their laughter." Before Ava could ask what she meant, the woman turned and walked away, her footsteps swallowed by the silence of the street. That evening, as dusk pooled across the marble floors, Ava sat in the study with a glass of wine and the mysterious envelope still unopened beside her. The wall behind the portrait seemed to hum faintly when the wind hit just right. Atlas lifted his head suddenly. Ears pricked. Lily called from upstairs, "Mom! Someone's in the hallway!" Ava set down her glass, her pulse quickening. "Stay in your room, Lily!" she shouted, rushing toward the stairs. But when she reached the landing, the corridor was empty, except for the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. The morning after Margaret Keene's visit, the city woke under a pale veil of fog. Ava Monroe sat in a small cafe near DuPont Circle, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug that smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt espresso. Across from her sat Walter Carver, his weathered face drawn into the folds of a man who had seen too many winters. His hands trembled slightly as he stirred his coffee, the silver ring on his finger tapping against the cup with a soft, rhythmic click. Carver's coat was the same shade of brown as old tobacco, and his hat lay beside him on the table like a retired soldier. The light from the window cut across his features, deep lines, sharp cheekbones, and a mouth that seemed forever pressed between truth and caution. "The Whitmore house," he said after a long silence, "wasn't always quiet. Back in the 70s, it was a hub for people who collected things." "Things?" Ava leaned forward. He nodded, eyes shifting toward the window where fog swirled like smoke. "Artifacts, paintings, statues, relics, some legal, some not. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore was an art patron, or so she claimed. But whispers said she was part of a network moving stolen artifacts out of war zones during the Cold War. Greece, the Balkans, the Middle East. It was a dangerous game." Ava frowned. "You mean smuggling?" "Preservation, they called it," Carver corrected. But when politics and money mix, preservation turns into profit real fast. There was one night, December 1974. I was a dockhand back then, young and stupid. A black truck without plates rolled up behind the mansion after midnight. They unloaded wooden crates marked fragile. I never saw those crates again. They weren't logged anywhere, just vanished. He sighed, the sound heavy with memory. A week later, the house was sealed. The next spring, Mrs. Whitmore fired most of her staff and lived like a ghost until she died. Ava's mind spun. Do you think whatever was in those crates is still there? Carver hesitated, meeting her eyes. If it is, Miss Monroe, I'd suggest you walk away. Some treasures were never meant to be found. But Ava had never been the kind to walk away. By afternoon, she was back at the mansion. Lily was in the living room, playing a clumsy game of tag with Atlas, whose tail thumped against the marble like a drumbeat. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, catching the dust as it rose in lazy swirls. For a moment, the house felt almost kind, like it had decided to tolerate their presence. "Don't go far," Ava called to Lily. "I'll be in the study." She crossed to the fireplace, kneeling where the floor met the ornate stone frame. The fireplace was old but elegant, carved with vines and small cherubs that had long since lost their halos. As she brushed away soot and ash, her hand caught on something metallic beneath the ledge. A hidden switch, so small it was nearly invisible. She pressed it. Sound answered her. Soft, mechanical, almost reluctant. The paneling beside the fireplace shifted with a hiss, then slid open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. Cold air exhaled from the gap, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and iron. "Atlas," Ava whispered. The dog came to her side immediately, posture rigid, hackles raised. His amber eyes reflected the dim light like molten glass. She clicked on her flashlight, angling it down the stairwell. The steps were stone, slick with moisture, winding into the dark. Something glimmered near the bottom, a faint trail of wet mud. Fresh. "Mom?" Lily's voice echoed faintly from the hall. Ava forced calm into her voice. "Stay upstairs, sweetheart. I'll be right back." The first step groaned beneath her shoe. The second was colder. Each breath seemed to echo against the walls. Atlas followed close behind, his nails clicking softly against the stone. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with mold and something metallic, like blood or rust. Halfway down, she paused. A sound reached her, a faint scraping, like wood against stone. Then silence. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, before steadying again. At the bottom of the stairs, the passage opened into a small underground chamber. The walls were lined with shelves, most empty, though a few still held rusted tools and glass jars that had long lost their contents. Against the far wall stood an old workbench, and above it, a map of Europe pinned under cracked glass. Lines of red string connected cities like Vienna, Belgrade, and Istanbul. Ava's fingers traced one of the strings, heart pounding. The map wasn't random. It was a route. Atlas barked once, sharp and alert. Ava turned. Footprints led back up the stairs. Not hers. She froze. Someone had been there, recently. The prints were larger than her own, the soles patterned like heavy work boots. They glistened wetly in her flashlight's beam, each step marked by a faint smear of mud. the same mud that now clung to her shoes. She followed them a few steps upward before something metallic caught her eye near the base of the stairs. A silver key, small and ornate, lay half buried in the dirt. She picked it up, brushing away the grime. The handle bore the same letter as the wax seal on the envelope. Atlas growled again, his body tense, gaze fixed upward toward the open panel. Ava's pulse hammered. Whoever had been here might still be in the house. She reached the top step and hesitated. The panel had slid shut. From the other side came a faint sound, like footsteps moving away, slow and deliberate. "Ava?" Lily's voice, faint and trembling. Ava slammed her shoulder against the wall. The panel gave way, sliding open with a shudder. The living room was empty. No sign of Lily. No sign of anyone. Only the curtains swayed slightly, as if touched by a passing hand. On the coffee table lay a new envelope, identical to the first, the same wax seal, the same letter M. She tore it open with shaking hands. Inside was a single line written in elegant cursive. "You shouldn't have gone downstairs." Atlas barked sharply, as if agreeing. Darkness fell like a curtain torn loose from heaven. One moment the basement glowed under the dull orange hum of the old filament bulb. The next, everything was swallowed by black. Ava Monroe froze, her breath hitching in her throat. Atlas stood rigid beside her, the fur along his spine bristling. The beam of her flashlight flickered once before dying completely, leaving only the scent of dust, oil, and fear. She pressed a trembling hand against the cold wall, forcing herself to breathe. "It's okay," she whispered, more to convince herself than the dog. "Probably just a breaker." But deep down she knew, the power failure wasn't random. Someone was there. A soft sound came from the far side of the room. Not footsteps, but something subtler, a shuffle, like fabric brushing against wood. Then a faint red light appeared, cutting a line through the darkness, a laser pointer or a targeting beam. It glided across the floor, slicing past Ava's boot, then vanished as suddenly as it came. Atlas growled, low and dangerous. His amber eyes glowed faintly in the dark, like two coals waiting to ignite. "Easy, boy," she murmured, but her pulse drummed in panic. She fumbled for her phone, the faint glow of its screen spilling dim light over the shelves. Her fingers brushed against the leather ledger she had found earlier, the one written in code. It felt heavier now, as if its secrets were pressing back against her hand. Then a voice drifted from the top of the stairs, soft, male, and utterly calm. "Miss Monroe," it said, "step away from the crates." Her heart seized. "Who's there?" The flashlight clicked back on suddenly, blinding her for a split second. When her eyes adjusted, a tall man was descending the stairs. He wore dark clothing, military-style boots, and a rain-soaked overcoat that clung to his broad shoulders. His face was sharply cut. Angular jaw, high cheekbones, and a short beard that looked like it had been trimmed with precision. His hair was salt and pepper gray, slicked back, and his expression betrayed nothing. He looked to be in his mid-40s, the kind of man who'd seen too much to fear anything ordinary. "My name is Damien Hale," he said, lowering his flashlight slightly but keeping it pointed near her. His voice carried the roughness of a man who'd spent years barking orders or keeping secrets. "I work in security. Let's say, international logistics." Ava tightened her grip on the phone. "That's one way to say thief." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. You found something that doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to you either, she shot back. Hale's gaze drifted to the open crate, the dull glint of rough sapphires catching the faint light. You have no idea what you've stumbled into. Those stones were never meant for the open market. Ava laughed once, bitterly. Yeah, I read the fake museum certificates. They were stolen, weren't they? From somewhere in Eastern Europe? Hale's silence was an answer in itself. He stepped closer, boots echoing against the stone floor. I'm here to make sure they go back where they were promised. To a museum? She challenged. Or to whoever pays you the most? For a moment, something human flashed in his gray eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. Then it was gone. You're in over your head, Miss Monroe. You need to walk away before this gets worse. Atlas stepped forward, teeth bared. The dog's growl reverberated through the room. Hale's hand twitched toward his coat pocket, but Ava lifted her voice sharply. Don't. He'll tear you apart before you even touch it. The standoff stretched for what felt like hours, broken only by the drip of condensation from the pipes above. Finally, Hale exhaled and stepped back. You don't understand what you're protecting. That ledger you found, it's not just an inventory. It's a map. A record of where the rest of the collection went. And if you don't give it to me, someone else will come for it. Someone who doesn't ask politely. Like you? No, he said quietly. Worse. Much worse. He backed up the stairs, his flashlight beam bouncing against the walls. You have until Sunday, he said, echoing the warning from the letters. After that, this place won't be safe. For you or your daughter. When he was gone, Ava sank to her knees, trembling. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Atlas pressed his head against her shoulder, his breath warm and steady. Good boy, she whispered shakily, clutching the ledger to her chest. Upstairs, she checked every lock and shutter before allowing herself to breathe again. Lily was asleep, curled up under a blanket on the couch, Atlas's paw resting protectively against her leg. Ava knelt beside them, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead. The clock on the mantel ticked past midnight. She looked down at the ledger again. Its cover bore faint impressions. Letters pressed into the leather by time. E.W. Eleanor Whitmore. Ava's chest tightened. Her grandmother had been part of it all. But why leave the evidence to her? Why now? She turned the first page and began decoding the numbers and symbols by the dim light of her phone. Some entries were coordinates. Others were dates. And beside one in particular, a notation in plain English. DC, final shipment, safeguarded below. She froze. Below. That meant there was another chamber beneath this one. Another secret. Atlas stirred, ears twitching toward the basement door. The faintest vibration passed through the floorboards, like something heavy shifting far beneath them. Ava rose slowly, her hand tightening around the key she had found earlier. The one marked with the letter M. She knew, without understanding how, that the key belonged to whatever was still down there. But as she turned toward the hallway, she saw a faint red light glowing through the cracks around the basement door. The same laser glow as before, but this time, steady. Watching. The house had gone silent again, holding its breath. The night over, Washington glowed with the amber haze of city lights. From the rooftop bar overlooking the spires of the National Cathedral, Ava Monroe could see the city spread beneath her like a glittering chessboard. She wore a sleek black dress borrowed from her friend at the clinic. the fabric hugging her curves, her hair pinned into a loose knot that softened the sharpness of her jawline. She looked calm, but inside, every nerve was coiled tight. Across the table sat Nora Price, an investigative journalist in her late 30s. Nora had the kind of look that belonged in war zones rather than cocktail lounges. Short blonde hair cut to the jaw, eyes sharp, and a little too knowing, her face marked by faint freckles and a faint scar above her left eyebrow. She had earned that scar covering a riot in Istanbul years ago. Her tone was calm but clipped. "You need to record everything, Ava. Don't let them intimidate you. If they're offering money, it means you're closer to the truth than you think." Beside Nora, Malik Shah, a lawyer in his early 40s, adjusted his thin-framed glasses. He was tall and lean, with dark skin, neatly cropped beard, and a quiet demeanor that carried authority. His voice was deliberate, his accent faintly British. "Miss Monroe, this isn't just about stolen artifacts. It's about provenance laundering, moving looted pieces through private collections so they re-enter the market legally. That ledger you found could expose people who've built empires off stolen history." Ava stirred her drink, eyes distant. "So what you're both saying is, if I go through with this meeting, I could lose more than my house." Malik gave her a small, sympathetic smile. "Possibly. But you could also make history." When Ethan Ward arrived, she recognized him instantly. The same tailored composure, the same too-perfect smile that never reached his eyes. He looked more relaxed tonight, the charm sharpened to corporate precision. "Miss Monroe," he said warmly, "my client appreciates your time." His client was Patricia Whitford, a woman whose name appeared in Art Foundation press releases and political donation lists. She looked to be in her late 50s, but carried herself like someone who had ordered the world to stop aging at 40. Her silver blonde hair was sculpted into waves, her pearl necklace perfectly centered. Her expression was polite but glacial, her lipstick a severe shade of crimson. "Miss Monroe," Patricia said, offering her hand with mechanical grace. "I'm told you've stumbled upon something delicate. Let's call it a legacy with complicated origins." Ava took her hand briefly. "If you mean the stones and the ledger, yes, I found them. They were in my house, my grandmother's house." Patricia smiled thinly. "Then you've inherited more than just property." She gestured to a server who brought a small velvet box, setting it between them. When Ava opened it, crisp, $100 bills gleamed under the bar's dim light. "300,000, Patricia said smoothly. "A donation for your time and discretion. You've already done enough. Let us handle the rest." Ava's pulse quickened. "And if I say no?" Patricia's gaze hardened, her eyes glinting with steel. "Then you'll invite attention from people who do not negotiate twice. Some artifacts are safer sleeping under dust than paraded in daylight." Nora's warning echoed in Ava's mind. Record everything. Her fingers brushed the small locket around her neck where a micro-recorder was hidden. She leaned forward, her tone calm. "You're saying you want to buy silence." "I'm saying," Patricia replied, voice soft as silk and twice as cutting, "that not every truth deserves to survive." Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside her, glancing at the skyline as if searching for escape. Patricia caught the movement and smiled at him, the kind of smile that could unmake a man. "Mr. Ward, you may order Miss Monroe another drink. It might help her reconsider." But Ava stood, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "I think I've had enough." "Think carefully," Patricia said. "Some doors, once opened, can't be closed." "Good," Ava replied. "I'm done living in locked rooms." She turned and left, heart hammering. By the time Ava reached the old gates of the Whitmore mansion, the night had turned violent. Wind howled down Massachusetts Avenue, tossing dry leaves like paper ghosts. She could smell the fire before she saw it. A chemical burn, sharp and cruel. Flames licked up from the back of the property, the orange glow rising behind the trees. "Lily!" she screamed, sprinting through the garden path. Atlas's bark cut through the smoke, frantic and fierce. He burst through the haze, his fur blackened at the tips, dragging Lily by the sleeve of her jacket. The girl coughed, her eyes wide with terror, but alive. Ava dropped to her knees, pulling her daughter into her arms. "It's okay, baby. I've got you." Atlas stood guard beside them, his chest heaving, eyes fixed on the inferno. The old storage shed behind the mansion was collapsing, timbers snapping like bones. The smell of burning oil filled the air. When the fire trucks arrived, the blaze was already dying. The fire chief, a broad, tired man with soot-streaked skin, approached Ava. "Lucky your dog acted fast. Could have been worse." "Do you know what started it?" she asked, her voice raw. He shook his head. "Accelerant, most likely. Deliberate." Later, when the property was cordoned off and the firefighters had left, Ava walked toward the blackened remains of the shed. Ash clung to her shoes, the night eerily quiet again. She knelt beside the debris and noticed something missing, a rectangular outline where one of the wooden crates had been. One had survived the fire because someone had taken it. She stood, clutching Lily's hand as Atlas pressed close to her leg and stared into the darkness beyond the garden. Somewhere, between the smoke and the silence, she knew Patricia Whitford had made her next move. The dawn over Washington crept in slow and gray, the kind of light that made marble look like bone. Smoke still lingered faintly in the yard behind the Whitmore mansion, curling from the charred ruins of the storage shed. Ava Monroe hadn't slept. Her hands trembled as she tied her hair back, staring at the message glowing on her phone screen. "Come alone, or your daughter will watch you fall down the marble stairs." The signature, M, tightened something in her chest. She had seen it before, the wax seal, the carved letter on the silver key, and now this. Whoever M was, they weren't finished. In the kitchen, Lily sat at the table in her pajamas, clutching a half-empty cereal bowl. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, but she tried to smile when she saw her mother. "It wasn't your fault, Mom," she said softly. "Atlas scared the bad guys away." Ava managed a smile. Atlas sat beside Lily, his fur still singed at the tips, amber eyes alert. He was calmer now, but his ears twitched toward every sound, every groan of the old house. He seemed to understand more than a dog should, as if he too was waiting for the next move. That afternoon, Ava met Walter Carver near the C&O Canal, a winding, moss-covered artery of the city that time had forgotten. The old caretaker looked different in daylight, almost fragile. His skin was sallow, his hat pulled low to hide a deep scar that traced from his left temple to his jaw, the faded souvenir of an accident he never spoke of. He pointed toward a cluster of ivy-covered walls near an abandoned pump house. "There," he said quietly, handing her a rusted lantern. "Service tunnel, built during the 20s to link the estates for deliveries and coal shipments. Your grandmother's house was the last one still connected. Follow the chalk marks. You'll find what you're looking for." Ava frowned. "And what about the people who took the crate?" Carver hesitated. "You're not the first to chase ghosts down here. Just don't go alone." She didn't. That night, Ava, Lily, and Atlas descended through the narrow brick corridor that sloped beneath the estate. Nora Price met them at the entrance, wearing a dark jacket and a press badge tucked into her pocket. The light from her phone beam sliced through the damp air, illuminating faded chalk arrows and strange symbols on the walls. "This is insane," Nora whispered, her breath misting. "We're following a centuries-old tunnel under DC, because a 70-year-old caretaker said so." "Because he's right," Ava murmured, running her fingers along the cold bricks. The ledger's last entry pointed to something hidden below. Whoever stole that crate didn't take it far. Malik Shah joined them a few minutes later, his trench coat brushing against the slick walls. His face, usually calm and composed, was tight with focus. "Interpol's been trying to track this smuggling route for years," he said. "If what you're saying is true, this tunnel could be the missing link between DC and an entire black market network." The air grew colder as they went deeper. Water dripped from rusted pipes, echoing like a slow heartbeat. Atlas walked ahead, nose low, tail rigid. Every few feet, he glanced back at Ava, as if to make sure she was still following. After nearly an hour, they reached an iron gate half buried in debris. Beyond it lay a chamber lit by a single hanging bulb. 3 men worked silently, their faces masked, their movements methodical. One of them was rolling a wooden crate onto a dolly, the same kind as the missing one. Ava's breath caught. She recognized the stamp burned into its side. Balkan Museum of Antiquities. "Wait," Malik whispered, raising a hand. "We need evidence before we move." But Atlas had already lunged forward, a blur of black and tan. His bark thundered off the tunnel walls. The men turned in panic. One swung a crowbar, the other drew a small pistol. Ava shouted, her voice cracking. "Atlas, down!" The chaos lasted only seconds. Nora threw a chunk of brick, striking one man in the arm. Malik tackled another to the ground. The third bolted toward the far exit, but Atlas intercepted him, pinning him with sheer weight and fury. When the dust settled, Ava dragged the crate back toward the lantern light, chest heaving. She pried it open enough to reveal the sapphire stones glinting faintly beneath a sheet of cloth. Nora was already snapping photos. "This is it," Nora said, breathless. "This is everything, the stolen stones, the evidence, the location." She turned to Ava. "We go public tonight." By dawn, the headline was live. "The Blue River Beneath the Capitol." Nora's article spread across networks like wildfire. It contained everything: recordings, photos, documentation linking the Whitford Foundation to decades of illicit artifact trades. Malik handled the legal side, contacting diplomatic channels to begin the official process of repatriating the sapphires under international law. For the first time in weeks, Ava felt something close to hope. But hope in her world didn't last. Late that evening, as she sat on the porch of the mansion with Lily and Atlas, her phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. The sender still marked unknown. "Beautiful work, Miss Monroe. The world finally knows. Now, come alone to the National Museum tomorrow morning. If you don't, your daughter will watch you fall down the marble stairs." The same phrasing. The same threat. Only this time, there was an attached photo. Lily, taken from across the street earlier that day, standing in front of the school gate. Ava's blood went cold. She looked toward the darkened yard, her reflection faint in the window pane. Someone was still watching. And they weren't finished yet. The morning sky over Washington was a soft, flawless blue, sunlight spilling across the marble steps of the National Museum like liquid gold. For the first time in months, The city seemed to breathe without secrets. Ava Monroe stood at the base of those steps, a tailored navy suit replacing the worn jeans, and fear that had carried her this far. Her chestnut hair caught the light, brushing her shoulders, and her hazel eyes reflected both exhaustion and quiet triumph. Beside her, Atlas walked proudly, his fur brushed to a glossy sheen, a crimson rescue service band around his neck. The crowd parted for them as they entered the grand hall. Inside, the museum shimmered with polished marble, sunlight pouring through its arched skylights. Reporters gathered behind velvet ropes, cameras poised. At the center stood the sapphire exhibit, stones now encased in glass, their deep blue facets glowing like frozen rivers. A plaque beneath them read, "Recovered through the efforts of Ava Monroe and partners in the preservation of cultural heritage." To her left, Nora Price adjusted her press badge, her once short blonde hair now grown to her chin, the faint scar above her brow barely visible beneath the makeup. Her camera hung from her neck, ready but unintrusive. "Smile, hero," she whispered to Ava with a rare grin. "You just gave DC its first scandal worth celebrating." "Heroes usually get more sleep," Ava murmured back. On her right, Malik Shah stood composed in his charcoal suit, a hint of pride flickering through his calm demeanor. The lawyer looked every bit the diplomat now, his tie impeccable, his notes clutched neatly in hand. "Today isn't about victory," he said softly. "It's about restoration. History belongs where it began." Before Ava could answer, the sound of polished heels echoed across the marble floor. Patricia Whitford appeared at the far end of the hall, flanked by 2 federal officers. Even in handcuffs, she carried herself with chilling dignity. Her silver hair remained flawless, her red lipstick precise. She didn't glance at the reporters or the crowd, only at Ava. For a fleeting second, something like regret crossed her eyes before she looked away, her composure cracking just slightly as she was led through the doors marked Investigation Division. Ava exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. Ethan Ward had already been taken into custody 2 days earlier, charged with arson, conspiracy, and extortion. His smug charm had crumbled into hollow silence when confronted with the recordings Nora had captured. Patricia's empire of philanthropy had begun to collapse like a marble statue with rot at its core. The ceremony began. A museum official, a man named Director Samuel Owens, in his late 50s, gray-haired but charismatic, took the podium. His voice carried warmth, the kind that came from genuine belief in what he said. "Today," he began, "we witness the reunion of beauty and truth. Thanks to Miss Ava Monroe, her brave companions, and a certain remarkable dog, these sapphires return home not as trophies, but as symbols of redemption." Applause filled the hall. Atlas barked once, perfectly timed, and laughter rippled through the audience. Ava felt the corners of her mouth lift. For once, the sound of clapping didn't feel like noise. It felt like peace. Later that afternoon, Ava walked through the exhibit one last time. A young intern approached, Clara Jenkins, barely 20, with freckles and oversized glasses that magnified her nervous smile. "Miss Monroe," she said shyly, "the city wants to know what you'll do next. You could work anywhere now." Ava looked toward the display, at the sapphire glinting behind glass, and then at her own reflection beside it. "I think I'll stay home," she said. "There's still one place that needs rebuilding." Months passed. Spring softened into summer. The Whitmore mansion no longer loomed in silence at the end of Embassy Row. Painters and carpenters filled its rooms. Laughter replaced the echo of secrets. The city had renamed it Hope House, a community arts and history center co-funded by the museum and private donors. Inside, the grand foyer gleamed under restored chandeliers. Children's artwork lined the hall, stories of courage and discovery scribbled in crayon. A plaque by the entrance read, "Dedicated to those who choose truth over comfort." Ava stood on the second-floor balcony, wearing a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair loose, her hands resting on the railing. Below, Lily, now 10, painted beside a group of children, her curls bouncing as she laughed. Atlas dozed near the door, a polished silver medal hanging from his red collar, a recognition from DC's Animal Rescue Unit for his heroism during the fire. The sunlight caught it just right, throwing a faint shimmer across the polished floor. Malik visited often, consulting on cultural preservation grants. Nora's feature documentary, The River Beneath the City, had become an award-winning exposé. And Ava had finally found her calling. As director of Hope House, she balanced history with humanity, teaching that not every treasure shines, and not every secret must stay buried. As dusk settled, the city lights began to glow across the Potomac. Ava stepped outside onto the balcony, the breeze warm and alive. In the garden below, Lily chased Atlas through the grass, their laughter rising like music. Ava watched them, her heart steady, her past no longer heavy. Behind her, the restored portrait of Eleanor Whitmore hung once more on the wall, no longer a ghost of guilt, but a symbol of legacy. Someone had cleaned the dust from her painted face. In the soft evening light, she almost seemed to smile. Ava closed her eyes, the golden air wrapping around her like forgiveness. Happiness, she realized, wasn't the absence of darkness. It was finding the courage to light a lamp inside it. Sometimes miracles don't come with thunder or wings. They come quietly, through ordinary hands that choose to do what's right, even when no one is watching. Ava didn't find gold or fortune. She found faith. Faith that truth can heal what lies once broke, that love can rebuild what greed once burned, and maybe that every act of courage is a small echo of God's own light shining through us. The sapphires were returned, but something greater was restored: hope. And tonight, as the sun sets over the Potomac, perhaps you too can find that same light in your home, your heart, your faith. Because miracles are not lost. They are simply waiting for us to see them. If this story touched your heart, share it so more people can believe in the power of truth and redemption. Tell us in the comments, what's a small miracle you've seen in your own life? Subscribe to our channel for more true stories of faith, courage, and the mysterious grace that moves through our world. And may God bless you, and every soul still searching for light in the dark.